Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford sat down earlier today with Senator Mike Lee. They discussed Kash Patel's confirmation hearing and the corruption in the FBI. Watch.
I'm joined now by Senator Mike Lee, the senior senator from Utah, and also a member of the Judiciary and Budget Senate committees, which will be taking a look at some of Donald Trump's nominees this week. It's a busy week for you, Senator. Tell me, let's start off with Judiciary and the FBI. You've been someone who's been vocal in the past about different problems with the FBI. You've co-sponsored the FACE Act to try and roll back some of the prosecutions of pro-life activists. And you've looked at some of the corruption and seen the lawfare over the last couple of years. What are you looking for in Kash Patel, and what sort of steps do you think are actually necessary to reform the FBI and bring it back to an institution that enjoys the wide trust of the American people?
Well, look, first, the FBI has been quite sadly politicized for years. And that means both incompetence and catching real bad guys, an obsession with going after regular Americans instead of doing its job. So they've gotten less competent at catching the real bad guys, and they've become obsessed with going after non-bad people, just regular, ordinary Americans with whom they happen to disagree. Recall that on New Year's Day, a guy carrying an ISIS flag murdered people and injured dozens more in New Orleans by running them over with his truck. The FBI's first response was to assure us that this was not a terrorist event. Now, what that means, I still don't understand, much less how it can be defensible. And it remains a tragic catchphrase with too many times where there's a preventable mass killing of some sort by a clearly unstable individual, that they'll blurt out the phrase, well, he was on our radar. But the FBI has seen fit to infiltrate Catholic churches, looking for mysterious extremists, and go after groups concerned about what's being taught in their kids' schools. Just parents who want a better education for their children have been all of a sudden targeted presumptive extremists that the FBI feels the need to track. FBI Director Christopher Wray told the Senate Judiciary Committee that the top domestic threat to Americans was, in fact, white supremacists. It shows how detached from reality their priorities are and how much they're pushing convenient liberal media narratives. So enter Kash Patel. Kash Patel's confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled for Thursday, January 30th. And as a member of that committee, I look forward to being there and getting him confirmed, because Kash is the antidote to a lot of this. A few people know that on paper, Kash will be one of the most qualified FBI directors in history. But you would never hear that from the mainstream media, from the legacy media, because they're determined only to spin their version of the story, which isn't true, which is that he's somehow not qualified. They refuse even to give him that credit. Instead, they worry that he'll do exactly what Christopher Wray has done routinely, but from the other political side, which is investigate his political opponents. That's neither fair nor accurate. And I think that Kash Patel shares the concerns I've just expressed, that the FBI and other parts of the federal government have been weaponized. They've spied on law-abiding citizens without warrants, and things like that have to stop. So
where do you think this went wrong? Is this a post-9/11 thing that was exposed by Donald Trump's presidency and the pushback to him, or is this a more recent phenomenon, or does it go all the way back to the founding of the FBI?
Well, look, obviously where there's power, there is potential for abuse of power. There have been abuses of power within the FBI throughout its existence. That doesn't mean that there haven't been a lot of things that have been done that were good. But in recent years, we've just seen a lot more weaponization, a lot more overtly politically oriented decisions that have been made. And these things are difficult to quantify, but we know it when we see it. And so it's yet another reason why we've got to get Kash confirmed. Reminds me of the statement that President Trump made the evening he nominated Kash Patel a couple of months ago, where he put out a post on social media saying something like, I have an immunity, but we need Kash now, echoing this familiar commercial that often airs on Fox News and a few other channels. But Kash Patel is exactly what the doctor ordered, and we all need Kash now.
Later that same day, I'm not sure how you'll fit all of this in, but you'll be talking to Russ Vought to be confirmed as potentially returning director of the Office of Management and Budget, someone who was a veteran of the first Trump administration, and someone who has really pushed the idea of impoundments, that the money that is appropriated by Congress for the executive to spend, that the executive is allowed to save money on that. Let's say if they say buy 3 tanks for $500 million and he can buy 3 tanks for $200 million, send the rest back to the Treasury. But it also seems to have been being used by this Trump administration already by acting directors to put a pause on U.S. aid to foreign countries until they can be reviewed, to put a pause on the trillions of dollars in grants given to left-wing nonprofits and other groups around the country and the world. Senator Chuck Schumer has really said that this is unconstitutional, that this is an attack on Congress. And you've long been a constitutional scholar and a defender of Congress's right to oversee the executive. How do you think this shakes out with impoundments and the future of the executive's ability to control spending?
Look, I've never considered myself a scholar. I'm a lifelong student of the Constitution. I'm a guy who has a copy of the Constitution that's well worn because I read it. And as I read the Constitution, the president is in charge of the executive branch. And as I read this effort the president is undertaking right now, this is just a good government measure to ensure that taxpayer money isn't going to programs that are incompatible with good governance and don't contradict the president's policies. And to act as faithful stewards of taxpayer money, people in the new administration, in any new administration, have to review federal programs to make sure that they're being executed in accordance with the law and also that they don't undermine the new president's policies. So this is kind of a safety valve that's consistent with the law to allow agencies to review spending. The pause does not apply across the board. It is expressly limited to programs, projects, and activities that might be impacted by the president's executive orders. It's targeted to examine whether programs that violate the president's priorities and policies set out in the listed executive orders, such as ending DEI, the Green New Deal, funding NGOs that undermine the national interest, and it also specifically exempts Social Security, Medicare, and programs that provide financial assistance directly to individuals. It's temporary, and it'll be operating on a case-by-case basis. It's not yet in effect, but it's designed to give these agencies lead time that they need to begin figuring out which programs are and are not affected and which programs might need to be reviewed for conformity with the president's executive orders.
And I know you are pressed for time, but one more question. There's been pushback now from some of the states and some of the cities and local government officials to try and circumvent the president's deportation of illegal immigrants. Previous presidents have said that they're really tied up constitutionally in their ability to try and punish or stop those local officials who circumvent federal authorities in immigration. What are some of the constitutional tools that are actually available to the federal government to be able to go ahead with this program?
Well, anytime you've got cooperation between state and local officials on the one hand and federal officials on the other hand, you're almost always dealing with something that involves an expenditure of federal funds. And the tool of first defense and the measure that usually encompasses efforts like that is the withholding of federal funds in the context of state and local officials who aren't carrying out the federal objective. There's nothing that obligates the U.S. government to continue to give money to state and local officials who are refusing to uphold their end of the bargain. And so that's one of the things that the Constitution allows us to do, and I think that principles of good government require us to do. Because unless we can hold those people accountable by saying we're not going to give you money just because we feel like it, we're going to give you money to the extent that you're willing to help us carry out this or that federal priority, that's how things are supposed to work.
Senator Mike Lee, thank you. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.